What if hair fall is not a hair problem at all, but a warning signal your body is sending before something deeper breaks down? Every strand you lose is evidence of silent inflammation, poor blood flow, stress cells, and disrupted metabolism working beneath the surface. Shampoos can't reach blood vessels. Oils can't fix immune confusion. Serums can't restart sleeping follicles. Only when the internal systems that feed hair are restored does real thickening begin. This is where hidden biological switches matter more than genetics, age, or products. When these switches turn back on, hair doesn't just stop falling, it remembers how to grow thick again. Hair fall is often treated like a cosmetic inconvenience, but it is actually a biological signal. Every strand that falls from your scalp is telling a story about what is happening deep inside your body, your blood vessels, your immune system, your hormones, your metabolism, and even your gut. When hair begins to thin, it is rarely because the scalp has suddenly failed. It is because the body is quietly reallocating resources, shifting priorities towards survival instead of growth. Hair is not essential for life, so when the body senses stress, inflammation, or nutrient scarcity, it is one of the first systems to be downgraded. What most people do next is predictable. They rush to shampoos, oils, serums, and surface treatments, hoping to force hair to grow from the outside. But hair follicles are living mini-organs. They require oxygen, micronutrients, healthy blood flow, and a calm immune environment to function properly. Without these internal conditions, no topical solution can override biology. Real hair regrowth begins when the internal environment changes. At the center of this process is circulation. Each hair follicle depends on a dense network of tiny blood vessels that deliver oxygen and nutrients. When these vessels are inflamed, narrowed, or damaged, follicles enter a resting phase and remain there. This is why chronic stress, poor sleep, insulin spikes, and nutrient deficiencies are so strongly linked to hair fall. The follicle is not dead, it is dormant, waiting for the right signals to wake up. Inflammation plays a second, often overlooked role. Low-grade, chronic inflammation silently interferes with hair cycling. It disrupts the signals that tell follicles when to grow and when to rest. Over time, this inflammation can shrink follicles, producing thinner and weaker hair strands. What makes this dangerous is that inflammation does not always come with pain or obvious symptoms. It can exist quietly for years, slowly affecting hair density before anyone notices. This is where targeted supplementation becomes powerful, not as a shortcut, but as a biological strategy. Certain compounds do not merely feed the hair. They support the systems that hair depends on: immune balance, blood vessel health, cellular repair, and hormonal regulation. When these systems improve, hair responds naturally, often faster than expected. Some supplements work by enhancing blood flow to the scalp, increasing oxygen delivery to follicles that have been starved for years. Others act at the cellular level, protecting follicle stem cells from oxidative stress, the same kind of stress that accelerates aging throughout the body. When oxidative stress decreases, follicles regain their ability to produce thicker, more resilient strands. There are also nutrients that help recalibrate the immune response around the hair follicle. Hair loss conditions often involve immune miscommunication, where the body mistakenly disrupts its own growth signals. Supporting immune balance does not mean suppressing immunity, it means restoring precision. When the immune system becomes smarter, inflammation around the follicle drops, allowing normal growth cycles to resume. Hormones are another critical layer. Hair follicles are exquisitely sensitive to hormonal shifts, especially those related to insulin, cortisol, and androgens. Certain supplements help stabilize blood sugar, reduce stress hormone spikes, and improve metabolic flexibility. When hormones stabilize, the chemical environment around the follicle becomes favorable again, reducing excessive shedding and promoting regrowth. What makes these supplements secret is not that they are rare or exotic, but that their true role is misunderstood. They are not magic pills for hair. They are biological allies that help the body restore conditions where hair growth becomes inevitable. This distinction matters. When people take supplements expecting instant cosmetic results, they are often disappointed. But when supplements are used to rebuild internal health pathways, hair becomes one of the visible signs that healing is taking place. Another overlooked factor is timing. Hair growth follows a slow, disciplined rhythm. A follicle that has been dormant for months does not restart overnight. However, once the internal environment improves, changes begin beneath the surface long before they are seen in the mirror. Blood flow improves, inflammation calms, stem cells reactivate, the scalp becomes biologically fertile again. Thick hair is not a luxury reserved for genetics alone. It is a reflection of how well the body is being supported at a cellular level. When nutrition is precise, when circulation is strong, when immune signals are clear, and when stress chemistry is controlled, hair responds with strength, density, and resilience. The real breakthrough is understanding that hair loss is not an isolated problem, it is a systems problem, and systems respond powerfully when given the right signals. Hair fall is not a surface-level issue, and it is rarely random. When hair begins to shed faster than it grows, the body is communicating that something internally is out of balance. Hair is a non-essential tissue from a survival perspective, which means the body will sacrifice it early when resources become limited or when internal systems are under strain. This is why hair loss often appears during periods of chronic stress, illness, metabolic dysfunction, or nutritional depletion. The follicle itself has not failed. It has simply received signals that growth is no longer a priority. Every hair follicle is a living, energy-dependent structure. It requires a steady supply of oxygen, amino acids, minerals, and growth signals to remain in an active growth phase. When the body experiences internal stress, whether from inflammation, poor blood sugar control, sleep deprivation, or hormonal imbalance, it redirects energy toward organs essential for survival. Hair follicles respond by slowing down, entering a resting phase, and eventually releasing the hair strand. This process is adaptive biology, not damage. One of the earliest internal stressors that affects hair is nutrient insufficiency at the cellular level. Even when calorie intake is adequate, micronutrient delivery can be compromised by poor absorption, inflammation in the gut, or impaired circulation. Hair follicles are particularly sensitive to these deficiencies because they divide rapidly and demand a consistent nutrient supply. When iron delivery drops, when zinc is insufficient, when B vitamins are not reaching cells efficiently, hair growth slows long before other symptoms appear. Inflammation amplifies this signal. Low-grade, chronic inflammation acts like background noise in the body, interfering with cellular communication. Around the hair follicle, inflammation disrupts the signaling pathways that regulate the hair growth cycle. Instead of smoothly transitioning from growth to rest and back again, follicles become stuck in a prolonged resting phase. Over time, repeated inflammatory signals can cause follicles to miniaturize, producing thinner and weaker hair strands. Stress hormones add another layer. Elevated cortisol alters blood flow patterns and increases insulin resistance, both of which reduce nutrient delivery to the scalp. Cortisol also shortens the growth phase of the hair cycle, increasing shedding. This is why emotional stress, even without obvious illness, can trigger noticeable hair loss weeks or months later. The body remembers stress at the cellular level, and hair reflects that memory. Metabolic health plays a critical role as well. When blood sugar levels spike frequently, insulin surges promote inflammation and disrupt hormone balance. Hair follicles are sensitive to these changes. Insulin resistance reduces the efficiency with which nutrients are transported into cells, leaving follicles undernourished even in the presence of adequate dietary intake. Over time, this metabolic stress signals the follicle to conserve energy by shutting down growth. Immune miscommunication is another hidden factor. In some individuals, the immune system becomes overly reactive around hair follicles, subtly interfering with normal growth without causing obvious autoimmune disease. This immune tension creates a hostile microenvironment that discourages hair production. Supporting immune precision rather than suppression allows follicles to operate without constant inflammatory interference. Blood flow is the final common pathway linking all these stressors. Narrowed, inflamed, or dysfunctional blood vessels reduce oxygen and nutrient delivery to the scalp. Hair follicles, deprived of oxygen, cannot sustain active growth. This vascular component explains why hair thinning often accompanies cardiovascular risk factors, smoking, sedentary lifestyle, and poor sleep. The scalp is not separate from the circulatory system, it is one of its most delicate endpoints. When hair loss is viewed through this biological lens, it becomes clear that the problem is not the hair itself. Hair fall is a visible outcome of internal strain, a downstream effect of systemic imbalance. The body is prioritizing repair, defense, and survival over regeneration. Until those internal signals change, external treatments can only mask the issue. Restoring hair growth requires changing the messages the body is sending to the follicles. When inflammation calms, when nutrient delivery improves, when stress chemistry stabilizes, and when circulation strengthens, follicles receive permission to grow again. Hair responds not to force, but to favorable conditions created within the body's internal environment. Healthy blood flow is one of the most underestimated factors in hair growth, yet it is one of the most decisive. Every hair follicle is surrounded by a fine network of capillaries whose only job is to deliver oxygen, glucose, amino acids, minerals, and signaling molecules exactly when they are needed. Hair growth is one of the most energy-demanding processes in the body, which means follicles depend on a constant and efficient blood supply to remain active. When circulation is strong, follicles thrive. When circulation is compromised, hair growth slows, thins, and eventually pauses. Oxygen is the first critical element delivered by blood. Hair follicle cells divide rapidly, and cell division requires oxygen to generate energy inside the mitochondria. Even a mild reduction in oxygen delivery can push follicles into an energy-saving mode. In this state, growth becomes inefficient, and the follicle shifts toward rest. This does not happen suddenly, which is why people often notice gradual thinning rather than immediate hair loss. The process reflects a slow, progressive decline in oxygen availability at the follicle level. Blood flow also determines how effectively nutrients reach the scalp. Minerals such as iron and zinc, along with B vitamins and amino acids, are transported through the bloodstream. If circulation is impaired, these nutrients may be present in the diet but never reach the follicle in sufficient concentrations. This creates a misleading situation where lab tests appear normal, yet hair continues to thin because delivery, not intake, is the limiting factor. Inflammation within blood vessels further restricts flow. Chronic inflammation causes the inner lining of vessels to become less flexible, reducing their ability to dilate. When vessels cannot widen in response to demand, blood flow becomes inefficient. The scalp, being at the periphery of the circulatory system, is especially vulnerable to this effect. Hair follicles at the edges of circulation are often the first to suffer when vascular health declines. Stress compounds this problem. When the body is under stress, it activates survival pathways that redirect blood toward essential organs such as the heart and brain. Peripheral tissues like the scalp receive less flow. This redistribution is useful in emergencies but harmful when stress becomes chronic. Over time, reduced scalp circulation becomes the new baseline, and follicles adapt by remaining in a dormant state. Insulin resistance also interferes with blood flow. Elevated insulin levels impair nitric oxide production, a molecule that signals blood vessels to relax and expand. Without sufficient nitric oxide, vessels remain constricted, limiting circulation to the scalp. This metabolic bottleneck explains why individuals with blood sugar instability often experience diffuse hair thinning rather than patchy loss. The health of the capillary network itself matters. Capillaries are dynamic structures that respond to growth signals. When vascular growth factors are suppressed by inflammation or oxidative stress, capillary density around follicles decreases. Fewer capillaries mean fewer delivery routes, reducing the follicle's ability to sustain active growth. This capillary rarefaction is subtle but powerful in its effect on hair density. Blood flow also carries signaling molecules that instruct follicles when to grow. Growth factors, hormones, and cellular messengers travel through circulation. When flow is sluggish, these signals arrive late or in reduced concentrations. The follicle interprets this as an unfavorable environment and delays growth. Hair loss, in this sense, is not simply a lack of nutrients, but a breakdown in communication. The scalp itself can become tense and restricted, further limiting microcirculation. Chronic muscle tension, poor posture, and reduced movement decrease blood flow to the head. This mechanical restriction adds another layer to the vascular problem, especially in individuals with sedentary lifestyles or prolonged screen time. When blood flow improves, changes begin at a microscopic level before they are visible externally. Oxygen levels rise, nutrient delivery increases, inflammatory byproducts are cleared more efficiently, and growth signals reach their targets. Dormant follicles regain metabolic activity. Stem cells receive the energy they need to divide, and the environment around the follicle becomes supportive of thick, resilient hair growth. Chronic inflammation is one of the most silent yet powerful forces driving hair thinning, and it often operates without obvious warning signs. Unlike acute inflammation, which appears suddenly and resolves quickly, low-grade inflammation lingers in the background for months or years. During this time, it continuously sends stress signals throughout the body, subtly altering how tissues function. Hair follicles are especially sensitive to this environment because they rely on precise cellular communication to cycle between growth, rest, and renewal. Inflammation disrupts hair growth by interfering with the signals that keep follicles in the active growth phase. Normally, follicles move through a well-timed cycle, spending most of their time producing hair before briefly resting and shedding. When inflammatory molecules circulate in excess, they shorten the growth phase and prolong the resting phase. The result is increased shedding and slower regrowth, even when the scalp appears healthy on the surface. At the cellular level, inflammatory compounds create oxidative stress. This stress damages proteins, lipids, and DNA inside follicle cells, reducing their ability to divide efficiently. Hair shafts produced under these conditions become thinner, weaker, and more prone to breakage. Over time, repeated exposure to oxidative damage can cause follicles to shrink, a process known as miniaturization, where each new hair grows finer than the last. Inflammation also affects the immune balance around the hair follicle. Hair follicles exist in a state of immune privilege, meaning they are normally protected from unnecessary immune attack. Chronic inflammation weakens this protection, allowing immune cells to interfere with follicle function. This does not always result in visible autoimmune disease, but it creates enough disturbance to impair normal growth patterns. Dietary factors play a significant role in maintaining or worsening inflammation. Diets high in refined sugars, processed oils, and ultra-processed foods promote inflammatory signaling. Frequent blood sugar spikes increase the release of inflammatory cytokines, which circulate throughout the body and reach the scalp. Over time, this metabolic inflammation alters the microenvironment around follicles, making growth less favorable. Gut health is another critical contributor. The gut is a major regulator of immune activity, and imbalances in the gut microbiome can amplify systemic inflammation. When the gut barrier becomes compromised, inflammatory molecules enter the bloodstream more easily. Hair follicles, being highly responsive to systemic changes, reflect this imbalance through increased shedding and thinning. Stress further magnifies inflammation. Psychological stress activates inflammatory pathways through hormonal and nervous system signals. Elevated stress hormones increase the production of inflammatory mediators, creating a feedback loop where stress and inflammation reinforce each other. This explains why prolonged emotional stress often precedes noticeable hair loss weeks or months later. Sleep deprivation quietly intensifies this process. Inadequate sleep reduces the body's ability to resolve inflammation and repair tissue damage. During deep sleep, anti-inflammatory pathways are activated, and cellular cleanup processes remove damaged components. Without sufficient sleep, inflammation accumulates, and hair follicles remain in a compromised state. Environmental exposures add another layer. Air pollution, toxins, and oxidative chemicals increase inflammatory load in the body. These exposures generate free radicals that circulate systemically, affecting delicate tissues like hair follicles. Over time, cumulative exposure can contribute to chronic inflammatory stress that manifests as thinning hair. When inflammation persists, the scalp becomes a hostile environment for growth. Blood vessels supplying follicles become inflamed, reducing nutrient and oxygen delivery. Growth signals are drowned out by stress signals, and follicles receive consistent instructions to conserve energy rather than invest in new hair production. Reducing inflammation shifts the entire biological landscape around the follicle. As inflammatory signaling quiets, oxidative stress decreases, immune balance improves, and cellular communication becomes clearer. Follicles are no longer pressured to remain dormant and can re-enter a productive growth phase when internal conditions stabilize. Hair growth depends on far more than isolated nutrients, and this is where targeted supplementation becomes meaningful. Supplements are often misunderstood as quick fixes that directly force hair to grow, but their real power lies in how they support the internal systems that govern hair biology. Hair follicles respond to signals from the immune system, the circulatory network, cellular repair mechanisms, and hormonal pathways. When these systems are supported correctly, hair growth becomes a natural consequence rather than a forced outcome. One of the most important roles of targeted supplements is restoring cellular energy. Hair follicle cells divide rapidly and require efficient mitochondrial function to sustain this activity. Certain nutrients support the enzymes involved in energy production, allowing follicles to maintain prolonged growth phases. When cellular energy improves, follicles are less likely to shut down prematurely and more likely to produce thicker, stronger strands. Oxidative stress is another area where supplementation plays a critical role. Everyday metabolic processes, environmental toxins, and inflammation generate free radicals that damage follicle cells. Targeted compounds help neutralize these reactive molecules, protecting the structural integrity of the follicle. When oxidative damage is reduced, follicle stem cells retain their regenerative capacity, and hair quality improves over time. Immune balance is a subtle but powerful determinant of hair health. Hair follicles require a calm immune environment to function properly. Certain supplements support regulatory immune pathways that prevent excessive inflammatory responses without suppressing immunity entirely. This precision allows the immune system to defend against threats while leaving growth processes undisturbed. As immune signaling becomes more refined, the inflammatory pressure around follicles decreases. Circulatory support is another key function. Some nutrients enhance endothelial function, improving the ability of blood vessels to dilate and deliver oxygen and nutrients to the scalp. Better circulation means improved delivery of growth signals and faster removal of metabolic waste. Follicles that were previously undernourished receive the resources they need to re-enter active growth. Hormonal stability is deeply connected to supplementation as well. Hair follicles are sensitive to fluctuations in insulin, cortisol, and androgens. Certain compounds help modulate stress responses, improve insulin sensitivity, and support balanced hormone metabolism. When hormonal signals stabilize, follicles receive clearer instructions about growth timing, reducing excessive shedding and promoting consistency in the hair cycle. Nutrient absorption is often overlooked. Even a well-balanced diet cannot support hair growth if nutrients are not absorbed efficiently. Targeted supplementation can support gut health, enzyme activity, and transport mechanisms that improve nutrient uptake. This ensures that essential vitamins and minerals reach the bloodstream and ultimately the hair follicle. Another critical aspect is cellular signaling. Hair growth is regulated by complex communication networks that tell follicles when to grow, rest, and regenerate. Certain bioactive compounds influence these signaling pathways, promoting growth-supportive messages while dampening stress-related signals. This reprogramming of cellular communication shifts follicles out of survival mode and into regeneration mode. Consistency matters more than intensity. Supplements work by gradually changing the internal environment rather than delivering instant effects. Over time, as oxidative stress lowers, circulation improves, immune balance refines, and hormones stabilize, the scalp becomes biologically supportive of growth. Hair responds to this environment with increased density, strength, and resilience. What makes supplementation effective is not the number of pills taken, but the alignment between biological needs and targeted support. When supplements are chosen to reinforce the systems hair depends on, they act as tools for restoring balance. Hair becomes an outward expression of internal repair, reflecting improvements in cellular health, vascular function, and immune precision. Hair growth depends on far more than isolated nutrients, and this is where targeted supplementation becomes meaningful. Supplements are often misunderstood as quick fixes that directly force hair to grow, but their real power lies in how they support the internal systems that govern hair biology. Hair follicles respond to signals from the immune system, the circulatory network, cellular repair mechanisms, and hormonal pathways. When these systems are supported correctly, hair growth becomes a natural consequence rather than a forced outcome. One of the most important roles of targeted supplements is restoring cellular energy. Hair follicle cells divide rapidly and require efficient mitochondrial function to sustain this activity. Certain nutrients support the enzymes involved in energy production, allowing follicles to maintain prolonged growth phases. When cellular energy improves, follicles are less likely to shut down prematurely and more likely to produce thicker, stronger strands. Oxidative stress is another area where supplementation plays a critical role. Everyday metabolic processes, environmental toxins, and inflammation generate free radicals that damage follicle cells. Targeted compounds help neutralize these reactive molecules, protecting the structural integrity of the follicle. When oxidative damage is reduced, follicle stem cells retain their regenerative capacity and hair quality improves over time. Immune balance is a subtle but powerful determinant of hair health. Hair follicles require a calm immune environment to function properly. Certain supplements support regulatory immune pathways that prevent excessive inflammatory responses without suppressing immunity entirely. This precision allows the immune system to defend against threats while leaving growth processes undisturbed. As immune signaling becomes more refined, the inflammatory pressure around follicles decreases. Circulatory support is another key function. Some nutrients enhance endothelial function, improving the ability of blood vessels to dilate and deliver oxygen and nutrients to the scalp. Better circulation means improved delivery of growth signals and faster removal of metabolic waste. Follicles that were previously undernourished receive the resources they need to re-enter active growth. Hormonal stability is deeply connected to supplementation as well. Hair follicles are sensitive to fluctuations in insulin, cortisol, and androgens. Certain compounds help modulate stress responses, improve insulin sensitivity, and support balanced hormone metabolism. When hormonal signals stabilize, follicles receive clearer instructions about growth timing, reducing excessive shedding and promoting consistency in the hair cycle. Nutrient absorption is often overlooked. Even a well-balanced diet cannot support hair growth if nutrients are not absorbed efficiently. Targeted supplementation can support gut health, enzyme activity, and transport mechanisms that improve nutrient uptake. This ensures that essential vitamins and minerals reach the bloodstream and ultimately the hair follicle. Another critical aspect is cellular signaling. Hair growth is regulated by complex communication networks that tell follicles when to grow, rest, and regenerate. Certain bioactive compounds influence these signaling pathways, promoting growth-supportive messages while dampening stress-related signals. This reprogramming of cellular communication shifts follicles out of survival mode and into regeneration mode. Consistency matters more than intensity. Supplements work by gradually changing the internal environment rather than delivering instant effects. Over time, as oxidative stress lowers, circulation improves, immune balance refines, and hormones stabilize, the scalp becomes biologically supportive of growth. Hair responds to this environment with increased density, strength, and resilience. What makes supplementation effective is not the number of pills taken, but the alignment between biological needs and targeted support. When supplements are chosen to reinforce the systems hair depends on, they act as tools for restoring balance. Hair becomes an outward expression of internal repair, reflecting improvements in cellular health, vascular function, and immune precision. Thick, strong hair is not an isolated trait, and it is rarely the result of genetics alone. It is a visible reflection of how well the body is functioning at a cellular level, especially in relation to metabolic efficiency and vascular health. Hair follicles are among the most metabolically active structures in the body, requiring constant energy, oxygen, and precise biological signals. When metabolic and vascular systems are optimized, hair growth becomes robust, consistent, and resilient. Metabolic health determines how efficiently the body converts food into usable energy. Hair follicle cells divide rapidly, and this rapid division demands a steady supply of cellular fuel. When metabolism is efficient, glucose enters cells smoothly, mitochondria generate energy effectively, and waste products are cleared without accumulating. In this state, follicles remain in the growth phase longer and produce thicker hair fibers. When metabolism is impaired, energy production falters, and follicles respond by conserving resources, leading to thinning and shedding. Blood sugar regulation plays a central role in this process. Frequent spikes in blood glucose trigger insulin surges that promote inflammation and disrupt hormone balance. Over time, insulin resistance reduces the ability of cells to absorb nutrients, even when those nutrients are abundant in the bloodstream. Hair follicles become metabolically undernourished, not because intake is low, but because delivery and utilization are inefficient. This metabolic mismatch directly affects hair density and strength. Vascular health determines whether nutrients and oxygen can actually reach the scalp. Healthy blood vessels are flexible, responsive, and capable of expanding when demand increases. This adaptability allows blood to flow efficiently to peripheral tissues like the scalp. When vessels lose elasticity due to inflammation, oxidative stress, or lifestyle factors, circulation becomes restricted. Hair follicles at the far reaches of circulation are often the first to experience this decline. Nitric oxide signaling is a key regulator of vascular function. It allows blood vessels to relax and improves microcirculation. When nitric oxide production is compromised, vessels remain constricted, limiting blood flow to the scalp. This reduces oxygen delivery and slows the removal of metabolic waste, creating a suboptimal environment for hair growth. Over time, this vascular inefficiency contributes to thinner, weaker hair strands. Metabolic and vascular health are deeply interconnected. Poor metabolic control increases inflammation, which damages blood vessels. Damaged vessels further impair nutrient delivery, worsening metabolic stress at the follicle level. This feedback loop accelerates hair thinning and makes regrowth more difficult unless both systems are addressed together. Lifestyle factors strongly influence these systems. Physical movement enhances insulin sensitivity and stimulates blood flow. Sleep supports metabolic repair and vascular recovery. Chronic stress disrupts both metabolism and circulation through hormonal and nervous system pathways. When these lifestyle inputs are misaligned, hair follicles receive constant signals that the internal environment is unstable. The scalp itself mirrors vascular health. Adequate blood flow keeps the scalp warm, flexible, and well-nourished. Reduced circulation leads to scalp tension, dryness, and decreased follicle activity. Over time, this environment discourages the production of thick hair fibers and favors finer, shorter growth cycles. Cellular communication depends on both metabolism and circulation. Growth factors, hormones, and repair signals travel through the bloodstream and are processed by metabolically active cells. When either system falters, these messages arrive late, in reduced concentration, or not at all. Hair follicles interpret this as a signal to slow down growth and prioritize survival. When metabolic efficiency improves and vascular function strengthens, the internal signals shift. Inflammation decreases, nutrient delivery becomes consistent, oxygen availability rises, and cellular waste is cleared efficiently. Hair follicles respond by extending their growth phase, increasing shaft thickness, and producing hair that is more resistant to breakage and shedding.